Purdue Pharma and Sackler family members who own the company will pay $7.4 billion in one of the largest settlements reached amid a series of lawsuits over the toll of OxyContin. Joining us now to break down this bombshell settlement is The Hill's courts and legal reporter, Zach Schonfeld. Zach, this deal still needs court approval, but can you break down this settlement as it stands now?
Absolutely. Hey, Bianca, this is now the culmination of what has been just about 7 months of negotiations, a new round of negotiations that began after the Supreme Court last summer had struck down what was the original bankruptcy plan. In that original plan, the Sackler family, which previously controlled Purdue Pharma, they would have contributed up to $6 billion to the settlement in exchange for getting a blanket liability shield. So after the bankruptcy, no one would have been able to sue the Sacklers over their work at Purdue Pharma. The Supreme Court struck that down, saying it wasn't permitted because the Sacklers themselves had not filed for bankruptcy. And then the parties have been back at the negotiating table for just about 7 months now. And that all culminated in this announcement today that the Sacklers have agreed to contribute up to $6.5 billion. So that's an increase of $500 million from what they were giving before. But notably, it does not include that liability shield for the Sackler family. So this deal looks a bit different than the original deal that was struck down by the Supreme Court. It'll now have to go to court approval, but there is now a potential pathway for this case to move forward.
Yeah, interesting that that shield, like you said, is not there in this potential deal. But the Sackler family would give up ownership of Purdue, with a portion of the money going to the victims of the opioid crisis. Will this settlement protect the family and company from future lawsuits at all?
It would protect the company, what is currently called Purdue Pharma, that would no longer, as you mentioned, be controlled by the Sackler families. It would become an entity that's essentially mainly looking at trying to reduce the opioid crisis that has been affecting the country in recent years. But as you noted, it would not include any blanket liability releases for the Sackler family, which had previously been the main sticking point and the main thing that had held together that original deal. That's why when the Supreme Court's decision came down last summer overturning the deal, why it was seen as such a big setback. There were years of settlement talks, based on those liability releases that suddenly were no longer allowed under the Supreme Court's decision. But according to reporting in the New York Times, there is another component to this deal that was not announced in the public release from the New York Attorney General. And that is, according to the New York Times, citing people familiar with the matter, this deal will also include a pot of money up to $800 million that will be given to the Sacklers to defend against any lawsuits. So they don't have a liability shield, but they will have a pot of money to go into to defend against any lawsuits that do arise.
Yeah, and it certainly feels like it could open Pandora's box in terms of potential lawsuits if it is, in fact, what ends up happening with that particular shield not being there. But I want to switch gears here and turn to Trump. On Thursday afternoon, a federal judge temporarily blocked Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship. And that order would have prevented the federal government from recognizing the U.S. citizenship of anyone born on U.S. soil, regardless of their parents' citizenship or residential status at the time of their birth. Now, the judge in this case ruled on just one of 6 lawsuits pushing back on that order. So can you walk us through the arguments and what the judge's decision means for Trump's executive order?
Yeah, this has really emerged as the first major legal battle of this new Trump administration. Now 6 lawsuits challenging this executive order that would restrict birthright citizenship in a way that would run contrary to how the 14th Amendment citizenship clause has long been understood by the Supreme Court. So there are now these 6 lawsuits. There was one that did go to a hearing this afternoon in Seattle that concluded very quickly with a federal judge blocking Trump's new executive order. So as of now, he cannot implement this new policy on birthright citizenship, but this order is only temporary. There are going to be continued proceedings in this case in the coming weeks, but also these 5 other lawsuits that have been filed across the country. This includes now 22 Democratic state attorneys general have filed lawsuits. We've seen private immigration rights groups, also several pregnant mothers who said that their unborn children would be affected by this. So a lot of plaintiffs, a lot of cases, there's going to be a whole lot of activity. So yes, a big setback for the Trump administration today, but a whole lot of rulings still to come in this battle over the executive order.
Yeah, it feels like everything is up in the air. Zach Schonfeld, as always, thank you so much.
Thanks, Bianca.
Senator Lisa Murkowski announcing Thursday that she will vote against confirming Pete Hegseth. Murkowski becomes the first Republican to announce her opposition to President Trump's nominee to lead the Pentagon. Murkowski's announcement comes after a flood of allegations of wrongdoing, including excessive drinking, aggressive actions toward women, and sexual misconduct. Hegseth and those close to him have repeatedly denied the allegations. There is still a path for Hegseth's confirmation, though, as he only needs 51 votes in the full Senate to be confirmed, and Vice President J.D. Vance can break a 50-50 tie in his favor. All told, Hegseth can afford to lose up to 3 votes before he fails to be confirmed. In just the first several days of his presidency, Donald Trump has made sweeping executive actions, pardons, and changes to federal government agencies. Over the next several months, The Hill's national political reporter and author of the 1230 Report, Cate Martel, will take a closer look at Trump's time in office with a new daily series, The First 100 Days. And Cate joins us now. Cate, can you give us a bird's eye view of everything he's done so far this week? I know it's a lot, but in layman's terms, can you break it down for us what's been going on?
Of course, Bianca. This has been a whirlwind of the past 4 days, and you can put it into 2 different buckets, executive and legislative. This has been obviously a very big week for executive actions. We saw President Trump issue 26 executive orders, involving pardoning the January 6th defendants that were involved in the Capitol attack in 2021. He also delayed the TikTok ban by 75 days to allow for potential divestiture. And he also made immigration a big priority. We saw 10 executive orders just related to the border, involving declaring a national emergency on the border to involve more of the U.S. military. There's also been a lot of other changes that have happened within the executive branch. We saw the government did pull down a few of the websites, including reproductiverights.org, and we also saw the DEI website and social media handles also disappeared. Now, the other big thing that's happened in the past 4 days is on Capitol Hill, which is a lot more thorny than just signing the papers on executive orders. We saw the Laken-Riley Act was passed by the House and the Senate. That's an immigration order that goes along very much with President Trump's immigration orders and priorities. And we also saw the first cabinet member, Marco Rubio, confirmed as Secretary of State, and leaders are hoping that by the end of the week they'll add 3 more to that column of confirmed. The other 2 major things that happened this week were Trump tried to create a lot of buzz, both by speaking with Sean Hannity in a wide-ranging interview, and then today speaking at the Davos Economic Forum.
So there has been a lot going on, to put it lightly, but I do want to ask about the World Economic Forum. He addressed the forum today. Take a listen to what he said.
My administration is acting with unprecedented speed to fix the disasters we've inherited from a totally inept group of people and to solve every single crisis facing our country.
So he clearly still has Biden on his mind, but on top of saying, I inherited this or that, did he give any insight into his agenda, in particular with tariffs, which has been on everyone's mind, or just the general economy?
We did see some indicators and some signals. What's interesting is in the first few days, we saw Trump really prioritize immigration and cultural issues such as the DEI push, anti-DEI push. But now with these remarks that we saw this morning, we're seeing a bit of a shift now to tariffs and the economy. Now, Trump did encourage companies to move their operations to the United States, and he promised very low taxes if they do so. Now, he did say that if they don't do that, they will be levied with heavy tariffs, including he's threatened by February 1st to have a 25% tariff enacted against Canada and Mexico, 2 of our biggest trading partners.
Yeah, that will be something to watch to see how that affects businesses. But like you also mentioned, President Trump has been nixing parts of the federal government since he was inaugurated. And some of these parts include DEI-related roles, groups, etc. And he had this to say today about that. Listen.
My administration has taken action to abolish all discriminatory diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense. And these are policies that were absolute nonsense. America will once again become a merit-based country.
So how is he trying to undo those Biden efforts?
Well, the major way he's trying to undo those Biden efforts is by removing the DEI website and social media handles. And the biggest way that he's done that is all federal employees related to DEI are now put on paid leave, eventually with the goal of laying them off, that this is very much a priority from the campaign trail that he is really leaning into, and I think will tell us a lot about his first 100 days, knowing that he is trying to dismantle some of these efforts.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how many of them really ultimately end up getting cut, or if maybe they get put in other roles, and how many people let go, because it feels like it's sort of unclear. But another thing that you mentioned before was eliminating certain internet resources for Americans on the HHS website, for example, when it comes to abortion. So what can you tell us about that? What was this about?
Yeah, so we've now noticed that on the HHS website, if you search for the keyword of abortion, it appears that those search results, according to NPR, have been altered. Now, when you search it, the top result is a Donald Trump related release from January 2020. And when you sort it by most recent, a lot of those disappear and we start to see error messages. And he also then did remove the reproductiverights.or.gov website that has existed to help people in the post-Roe world. That now that, is interesting to see that while this wasn't part of his inaugural address or the executive orders over the past week, that we are starting to see this subtle signal from the Trump administration towards abortion.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out throughout his second term. But other federal health agencies have been ordered to pause all external communications for the time being, like social media posts, health advisories, etc. So how long is that expected to last? And what is the intention here?
It's a good question on how long it's supposed to last, because some of the staffers involved didn't expect it to last this long, that there was a small review and transition period expected before Trump took office, but now it seems that the size and the scope of this review is a lot broader than had been expected. But it may sound minor that there's certain parts of the websites that are not up, and part of that is there's just such a logistical challenge to turn all of this over in just a few short days. But when you step back more broadly, that there are some important health advisories and social media posts that have been removed that are not going to be being published as a part of this review. So there's a lot of decisions that affect every American, particularly related to health. And this really does put all of this on pause.
Yeah, and it's, things could happen. So it will be interesting to see how they adjust if that happens. But the White House Spanish language page was also shut down after Trump took office. Is that also seen as a temporary move, a permanent move, and why?
It's a good question. And it is, the White House says that is a temporary thing, that this was not something that they did on purpose. But I think it's also worth noting that in 2017, this same website went dark and then came back in 2021 after when Biden came back into office. So it sure appears that it is not at all an accident. But the White House, for what it's worth, is saying that this is very much a temporary move.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, interesting to see what will happen with that. Cate Martel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
To sign up to receive Cate's 1230 report, go to thehill.com and click on newsletters. DC has made its way to Hollywood. Actor Sebastian Stan has clinched an Academy Award nomination for his portrayal of President Trump in the movie The Apprentice. The actor landed his nomination for Best Actor for his depiction of young Donald Trump and his rise to success. His co-star Jeremy Strong also nabbed a nomination for Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of Trump's mentor, Roy Cohn. The Apprentice movie sparked criticism after its release, including a Trump lawyer sending a cease and desist letter to the movie's filmmakers. Director Ali Abbasi says he felt the need to make the move to deal with what he called the rising wave of fascism in the U.S. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Bianca Facchinei. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.